Welcome to the A1 podcast. It is your host, Oscar Lee. I'm joined today by the world's most dangerous man, UFC Hall of Famer, Impact Wrestling Hall of Famer, current superstar, WWF superstar, King of Pancreas, the man who's done it all in the pioneer in combat sports, Ken Shamrock. Ken, how are you doing today? Oh, Ken? Ken, you there? I think your screen froze.
Yeah, I still got them. Are you? Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Yeah, perfect.
Oh, sorry
All
about
right,
that. Sorry about that.
no worries. Say,
Try
how you
this
doing?
again. Try this again.
Okay, yeah. So we'll do it again. All right. Welcome to A1 Podcast. It is your host, Osfuli. I'm joined today by the world's most dangerous man, Ken Shamrock. Ken, how you doing today?
I'm doing well, brother. How about you?
Doing great, man. Oh man, I just watched your most recent episode of Impact, and you just came out blazing. And I loved it. I loved it, and I love. And here's one more thing. I saw you respond to that dude on Twitter who basically said Ken Shamrock looks like an old dude who scowls at guys and doesn't do anything. And your response was perfect. You're like, it looks safer from the couch, but you come try me.
Right. Yeah, you know those people get awful comfortable when they don't have to worry about anything coming back at them.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Obviously you're still in great shape. I mean, I'm trying a little bit, but I mean, still, Ken Shamrock's still the good man, man.
Right? You're working it. That's good. That's
Yeah.
good.
Appreciate it. Yeah. So obviously, I mean, this is kind of, it's gonna be a free flowing conversation. I'm gonna start from the beginning when we'll progress through. So, obviously, I'm one of your biggest fans. As I mentioned, in the beginning, you obviously inspired millions of fans across the globe. And so you started off, kind of like you actually started playing. You actually were a two-sport athlete. You're a wrestler. You did wrestling, but you also were a football player. And you actually, kind of like me, you went to a Cali JUCO and played football at Shasta. I played at San Jose City College, West Valley College, and you played at Shasta.
That's right.
So
Yep. That's right. Yep. And it was had really good years. I would have probably gone to a university, but in my senior year in high school, wrestling, I broke my neck. So it took away any opportunities for me to go to, because I was looking at Riverside City. They had a state out there, a state college out there. And then, of course, was it San Luis Obispo, Humboldt, a couple other ones that had some state colleges out there that I was looking into. But once I broke my neck, I had to rework everything again and then go into a JC in order to get looked at.
and it's funny because now they have Last Chance U, and I played at JUCO over 10 years ago. You played in your day. And I mean, we kind of, and you know this as much as I do. It is Last Chance U, right? Because at that point, it's like you at one point or another, something came along the way which prevented you to go to the 4 year, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and a lot of that had to do with because when I was in high school, when I got into high school, I was in special ed because prior to that, I was in and out of juvenile hall, living in the street, living out of cars, getting into fights, doing all kinds of stuff. Not in school, in grade school. So when I actually went into high school, when I got put in a placement at Shamrock Boys Home, I was 13. So I was just getting into freshman year, and I had no education, so I had to relearn everything all the way through high school. Then when I got into college, even if I would have gotten an opportunity, if not breaking my neck, I still would have had to pass SATs.
Right.
And I wasn't able to do that. So it was kind of weird how things worked out. But obviously as years went on and went to junior college, I started getting more educated and having a better opportunity to pass SAT scores. But fortunately for me, when I was in junior college, I had a great football career, had opportunity to play with the Chargers, to try out there. There was other opportunities that started to rise up that I felt like I would probably be better suited for, which was more individual sports.
Right. And pretty much, and that was my next question. You basically answered it. Kind of, you had the Chargers tryout, you declined it because you obviously saw a career in individual combat sports. What inspired you to pursue pro wrestling? Was it because of your great wrestling background, or was it just because you were interested at that time to go and join Buzz Sawyer and those guys?
Well, I think it was more opportunity.
Yeah.
Especially where I was sitting after going to JUCO and had a great, 3 years. I went there for 3 years. First year redshirted, second year because of my broken neck. I had to wait another year to get my body where I needed it to be so I could actually go out and play. But so I redshirted my first year and played the next 2 years, had a great 2 years starting, was a captain, real good success. But then I started seeing other opportunities, which pro wrestling was another one, which really wasn't something I was looking at, but I saw it as a gateway to where I wanted to go. And so I just started practicing, did some stuff with Buzz Sawyer because it was close by. Started shooting on guys, my background, beating guys up, collecting money. And then once Buzz died, he ended up, dying from an overdose. Um, I started looking otherwhere because I felt like, wow, I mean, this is pretty cool. I'm shooting, I'm making money, I'm learning a craft. And so I went down to North Carolina and to Nelson's school. It was funny too, because they weren't beating guys up and taking their money. Like that's Buzz's setup was he'd bring a couple guys in. He had me beat them up. He'd take their money, whatever they paid, right? They weren't getting it back if they didn't pass the tryout. Well, when I went down to Nelson's, it started to feel like that because they had a bunch of guys there. They started to work us out and they brought a shooter in to like beat us up. And I was thinking, oh, this looks familiar. The only thing is they don't know that I was a shooter. I was the guy beating guys up.
Right.
So and I was wore out because they just push-ups and ran through these dirt fields and just wore us out. So the fresh guy would come in and have a pretty good chance at thumping us, right? Well, about probably 2 or 3, 4 minutes in, the guy was, working me, but I was holding my own. And then I got into where I was at, where we were both tired now. And then I started beating the crap out of him. Then now it was getting even. So now I knew I had a chance at thumping him. So I ended up beating their shooter. A year later, I'm carrying the strap for their organization.
Yeah, beating the fucking shit out of dudes, just like with one hand, arm but tied behind your back. Easy money.
What? It's funny. You walk into a situation, and especially if you got the mind of a champion.
Yeah.
You don't walk into it, especially if you got a broken hand or you got a bad knee or something's wrong. You don't walk in going, well, I'm not going to do well because no, you walk in knowing you got this, but you figure out a way to win. You always going, I'll still win. I just figure it out as we go. Like whatever happens in there, I'll figure it out. So you don't go in thinking you got a handicap. You go in knowing that there's something there that you got to try to work around it to win.
100%, and to that point, obviously, and I'm just going to turn to my own life experience because what you mentioned just kind of resonate with me. I wasn't able to play football in high school because of my grades. I was a fucking knucklehead my first couple years, and so your story resonates so much with me because if you can't tell in the background, I was able to make a professional football career out of it in the Arena Football League. So that's where I got these boys, right? So pretty much, even though I was undersized, maybe 5'10", $150, dripping wet, even though I was at disadvantage, I looked at the advantages. I'm like, I know that I can leverage some of my kind of intrinsic qualities as an athlete to carry this distance, and I'm kind of what you just said kind of resonated with me when you said that.
Yeah, because you got to figure this, man. Everybody at that level, when you get to that level, everybody there is good, right? What separates you from them? And the idea to me is the mindset. It doesn't matter whether they're all good because in your mind, when it comes down to crunch time or go time or that clutch moment, you're the guy. Like, you don't care how good anybody else is. You're the guy they can rely on because I'll make it happen.
Bingo. Exactly. And when you know that you can be that guy and you have that confidence in yourself as an athlete, there's nothing that can stop you. There's nothing. It's 90% mentality, mindset. So
yeah, you figure it like this too. I've always related this because now that I'm doing other things in my life, but during that time, you really couldn't equate it to anything, right? But now that I'm out of that and I'm going more into the entrepreneurial biz, and creating businesses and opportunities, that mindset that people don't understand, being able to take that same concept and then turn it into regular life. Like there's nothing that you cannot accomplish. You may go run into a couple different walls, man, but you got to figure out a way around it, like over it, under it, around it, through it, however you got to do it. You just have to figure it out because it's no different than what I achieved in sports. It's like run into all kinds of obstacles, but you figure it out because there is no other way. If you want to be successful, you figure it out.
Facts. Big facts. If you can figure it out, I mean, shit. Nothing can stop you. And you just like you said, I mean, there shouldn't be any excuse, right? Why people are in the excuse make business nowadays? So I totally again. I mean, this is just it's awesome because that's my mission. I think for every day, I attack every day knowing that there's gonna be some challenge. And kind of I read one of your articles with the interview. They said why Ken did you stop? Why haven't you stopped wrestling? Why haven't you stopped fighting? You could be doing so many other things, right? And then you said that, but when you sit around, you basically get old and you start dying, but you want to always consistently challenge yourself on a daily basis, right? And that resonates with me too. So
Well, it's too. The opportunities are there. It's not like I was out there pushing to do this. People were coming to me and saying, "Hey, you want to fight here? Hey, you want to fight here?" It wasn't like I was forcing my way in through these doors. I mean, that's what I don't think a lot of the fans and people understand was it wasn't me going, "Hey, I still want to fight," and me telling them they got to fight. They don't have to fight me, right? I mean,
right,
it's not my choice, right?
yeah,
I want to fight. And when I put my name out there, a promoter's going to go, "Yeah, we want you. And if you can pay me what I want, then I'm going to fight," right? I mean, like, that's my job. Like, I do the best I can, right? I already reached the top. I was the pinnacle, all of that. So now when I get there and you get to a certain age, there's the concept of how people think don't make sense because it's like, oh yeah, you're at a certain age. And even though you're better than 75% of the other fighters out there, before you were better than all of them, you were at the very 1% level. Now you've dropped because you've gotten older, but yet you can still beat 70% of the fighters out there. And you're at a pro level, right at the top level, but yet they don't want you to do it anymore to make money. You're like, what?
what
If
the
you
fuck?
still enjoy doing it, why wouldn't you keep working in something that you're good at? Even though you got a little bit older, it doesn't matter. You still can perform and you can still do a good job and you make money.
Facts all the way. Facts all the way. So yeah, let's go ahead and talk about kind of when you finished up with the Buzz for the wrestling bit. Did you go into Japan or did you start UFC? Kind of how that kind of transition? 'Cause I wasn't. I think you went to Japan and then you started fighting and then you came back to UFC. Is that right?
Yeah, I went to Buzz, did some shooting over there for him. Didn't learn much of the pro wrestling thing, but I ended up going to North Carolina, moved down there once I passed the tryouts,
Right.
and I did a program down there, working that territory, probably for 2.5 years, and then I met up with Dean Malenko, who was on tour with me. He stayed at our house while he was working that territory with us, and he showed me a tape of Suzuki and Funaki, who were fighting in this organization called UWF, and it was a pro wrestling shoot style pro wrestling. And so I was like, "Dude, I want to try it." And he's like, "Okay, but it's stuff pretty rough." And I was like, "Yeah, let me have it." So I did a tryout and did well over in Miami, over at Dean's dad's gym where they would practice at, Dean's gym and Jody's gym over there in Florida. And so I pretty much dominated those practices. They sent me over to Japan to practice over there and got the crap beat out of me in Japan. Was much different over there, but I'd never been handled like that before. So I was like, "Dude, I want to do this." And I know probably, I don't know if it was 2 months. I don't remember how long it was, but I went back over to Japan, trained for 2 or 3 weeks prior to my first fight, and I won my first event. And from that point on, I was like, "This is it, man.
Yeah.
This is it."
Yeah. And then from that point on, I mean, yeah, obviously, then were you approached by UFC to start fighting with them at their first promotion, or kind of how did you get into that?
Yeah, I was actually after UWF.
Yeah.
Um, the organization split apart with Takada, Fujiwara, Maeda. It broke apart, and I think I had 1 or 2 matches there. My last match was with Funaki. We went 46 minutes on a match, which was crazy. It was a long. That was my second match. And so once that broke apart, they started forming other organizations. Takada did his, Maeda did his, Fujiwara did his. And so, of course, I went with Sammy, who was the guy that brought me in, the booker, and he went to Fujiwara. So I went with them. And probably, I don't know, 3, 4, 5 matches in, Suzuki and Funaki came to me and said that they wanted to turn pro wrestling into a real shoot. Not the hard shoot that we were looking at where the ending was predetermined, but anything between that, you were hitting and punching like sparring. He said, no, we want it to be real. And I was like completely lit up, like going, I'm in. Because I've always been that. I always want to challenge myself more. I've always been that way. I want the hardest.
Right.
And so we started the very first one called Pancrase. We did our first show there. It was the first shoot I think anybody ever seen when it came to mixed martial arts. I had beaten Funaki in the main event. I know that I think they were planning on Funaki winning because I did training. Funaki was teaching me. I was learning from Suzuki, Funaki, Fujiwara, everybody. But I never really completely let go. I never really gone in and actually went. So I don't think they really realized how much I had in my tank, like what I was capable of doing.
Right.
And so they put me against Funaki, and I'm almost, since it was main event, I'm almost positive they thought that Funaki was going to win. And I end up upsetting him with a side choke, which is one of my favorite moves. But I tried it like 3 times on him, but I kept setting him up with the same choke. And then I changed the setup and then caught him with it. And I ended up winning. And I was excited too when I did, because I didn't realize it was going to be that fast. But I felt like I could beat him. I was going to have to just take my time with him. But I caught him pretty early, and it was pretty exciting. And then from that point on, I became the champion, did a 2-day tournament, won that. And then UFC came up in the States. I remember I got some flyers. One of my students seen the flyer. Scott Bazak actually brought it to me and said, dude, check this out. And I looked at it and I was like, what? It's like no holds barred. I said, that's pro wrestling. Because no holds barred, I mean, that's what everybody knew what was pro wrestling, right? He's like, no, man, this stuff's for real. There's this guy who's supposed to be able to beat anybody. And, he's about 180 pounds or something like that. And, and I was like, at the time I was probably 190 pounds, 195 pounds. So he was somewhere in my weight class. And he was supposed to be this guy with his geek or Gracie and doing all these things. And so I called Art Davies and I remember saying, hey, I'm interested in your tournament. And so I like, what is it? Is it real? And he was, no, this is real. And I was thinking to myself, yeah, sure. I was like, so they're just going to be able to kick people in the head, bite them, whatever, kick them in the groin. He said, absolutely.
Right.
Like, okay, I want to go. I want to be in it. He goes, well, we're only taking guys that have some sort of, pedigree. And I was like, well, I'm the champion over in Japan. And he goes, what is it? I go, oh, it's a mixed style of groundwork and stand up. And he's like, that's kind of what we're looking for. And he goes, is it real? And I go, yeah, it's real. And I remember thinking, he goes, okay, I'll get back to you. I think he was going to check up on us. So he found out and then immediately called me back, said, you're in. And that's really how it got started. It was just me climbing from one ladder to another ladder and always looking for the extreme.
And it's funny you mentioned your champion that you won in Japan. You were the first foreign mixed martial arts champion in Japan at that point. So that's another thing to add to your guys, but the first, Yeah,
and that's pretty awesome too, because you look at a lot of guys that came out of Pancrase, man, there was some really skilled fighters, because I think Pancrase forced you to be very good at stand up and ground because of the way it was set up. You couldn't just rely on groundwork because you were rope escapes. And so you had many times to be able to get back to your feet again and be able to make guys work to take you down and get tired, and you can land your kicks and your punches. So it really forced guys to be well-rounded. So I was really also the first guy that walked into that cage that was well-rounded in striking and groundwork, because I did Muay Thai. I wasn't, the greatest at it, but I did have a professional kickboxing match. I had the skills. So, I mean, I was definitely the only one that had the background that could fight standing up and on the ground.
Right. And, to kind of have both, and that translated to the modern day UFC. And I was going to ask you a question. We already kind of answered it. I was going to say, because I remember heard you on another interview, we talked about, back in the day, you said no holds barred, no regulations. You didn't even wear gloves. You didn't even, you know what I mean? And so obviously, like, the transition of kind of, but you obviously came back when things started becoming more regulated, to fight. But, and we'll get there in a bit. But basically, with the kind of early years, it was just like, I thought it was really interesting to see that you just jumped head first into, like, I was like, that's a fucking badass thing to do, right? So, I mean, kudos to you on that. So
well, my background too is, I was in juvenile hall. I was on the streets, So when they told me that it was like anything goes, in my mind, I was thinking like, well, that's a lot better than what I'm used to. Because normally, you get into an issue, you got to think about knives and guns or being jumped. There's a lot of issues, right? So me walking into something like that, I was like, that's a cakewalk. I got to fight one guy.
Yeah, it's one guy. So then let's talk about that one guy. You went to UFC one, and was Gracie? Was he your first opponent?
Yeah,
Yeah.
UFC
Okay.
one, man, it was in the atmosphere was confusing. A lot of changes, a lot of stuff that was supposed to be okay, wasn't okay. It was supposed to be no hold barred, anything goes. And they literally wouldn't let guys tape their hands, which didn't understand that. Like, did not, I mean, even though I wouldn't tape, but I didn't understand when it was supposed to be no holds barred, anything goes. We all get there and they got a rules meeting. We're like, wait a minute, there are no rules. Why are we having rules? And they say, well, we just want to kind of explain to you how things. So we all show up, and then all of a sudden there are rules. You're like, okay, so I can't wear my wrestling shoes. I had never been on a wrestling mat or a canvas without having wrestling shoes on. And anybody that knows it's like it's a common thing, so it's hard for people to understand it. But it's like being on ice when you're used to wearing wrestling shoes. And then the day before you're supposed to go in and fight somebody, and you've been practicing the whole time with your wrestling shoes on. And now all of a sudden they're taking that away. It's like taking one table away on a four-legged table, taking one of those tables away, one of those legs away. It won't stand up. It's going to fall down. And that's kind of how you felt when you were on your feet. You just felt like one of those legs were gone because you were off balance. So even going into that, everything was confusing. They changed the card. Like, I couldn't tell you how many times. Nobody knew who was fighting where because they kept changing the card around. So I don't know, maybe a couple hours before the event goes off, they do this press thing and everybody's in there punching the bag and this and that. And I see Royce Gracie and all these other guys. And I remember thinking when I was on the phone about them putting the card together and saying that they need guys that had pedigree, people that had, some background. And I looked around and I was shocked because I think half of them shouldn't have been in the ring. It was just, I mean, they definitely didn't work out for the fight. They didn't look in shape. And then you had the other half, like Gerard Godot, who was a legit badass in Japan, right? He was a tough guy. You saw him there, and then you saw, Royce Gracie, which I didn't know him at all, but he's walking around, looked to me like pajamas on, right? And but there wasn't a whole lot of credibility there. They had a guy, Art Jemerson, who was a boxer, right? And in this event, thinking to myself, because I had already been over Japan, I'm like, he's gonna get killed. Like, he's got no chance in there. Then he comes out with one glove on, which was even wait a minute, I can't wear my shoes. Guys can't tape their hand, but he can wear one boxing glove. I'm like, wait, hold up. What is happening here? And then Royce comes out after I beat Pat Smith, who was another guy that was supposed to be a favorite on my side of the bracket. He was supposed to be the favorite just because they knew who he was. Nobody knew who I was, right? I was over in Japan. So I was kind of that sneaky guy there. So I finished it pretty quick. And so I'm thinking to myself, I'm going to win this because I know Gerard Godot. He's a tough guy, but I know I can get him on the ground. It's over. I mean, he's a great striker. He's a tough guy, but once I get him on the ground, it's over. And I knew that. So I didn't think there was anybody there, And so I get in there and I take Royce down, and I remember thinking this is going to be a breeze. And all of a sudden I've got this rope around my neck. And I'm trying to, because if it's an arm or something, I'm normally really good at being able to get the arm on, get my chin down and get away from it. I'm pretty good at that. Considering that he was kind of on the side of me and we were in a scramble when that thing went around my neck. And I just didn't understand how that worked. And so I'm trying to grab an arm and there's no arm. It's like a rope. And I kid you not, if this wasn't what I was thinking, and I know it was like a split second, right? But I'm thinking, I can't wear my shoes, but he can choke me with this rope. I'm like, wait a minute. How is that not a weapon? Like, you're saying my shoes were a weapon. You're saying tape is a weapon. Boxing gloves okay. Gi is okay because you can choke somebody with it. But my wrestling shoes are not okay. And this was going through my head, and like, you're talking 3-4 seconds as I'm trying to get this thing off, and I can't get it off, right? And then I tap, and I remember thinking to myself, I just tapped. I can't believe I just tapped. Because at this time, I really believed there was nobody that could beat me. I mean, I just felt like I was on top of the world, but I got humbled. Even though all that other stuff happened, with taking stuff away, and it did affect me. There's no question, because the second time I fought him, it was a much, much different fight, because we were all aware of what was going to happen, and what we weren't all being shuffled around and not knowing what the cage is and how the fights are going. We just didn't know. It was very confusing. And they've been practicing this for years, right? I mean, there were fights in their gym preparing for stuff like this. So everybody else was confused about what was going to happen, how it was going to happen, and they knew exactly what they were doing. So eventually, and it didn't take me long, it was a couple months, I caught up to it, ended up pushing him over. They even put a time limit in, which is kind of shocking since they never had one before. So they must have known something, because I'd gone 46 minutes with Funaki with no problem. So yeah, just those things like that, the way it started out, it just felt like, and it was, and nothing against them. I thought it was kudos to them to be able to get it done, but it was an advertisement for their jiu-jitsu system. And you look what it's done for them. I mean, it was a brilliant idea, no question.
Right, totally was, and it's amazing kind of how that, that I think that was where Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu kind of got its credibility. That event, and that the rear naked choke is then what the movie became known as. So I
Yes.
think that, yeah. So I mean, you're basically part of that. And
Yep.
obviously with UFC, I mean, being a pioneer, from the UFC one, and obviously, working your way up to become the UFC first ever UFC super fight champion, your rivalry with Dan Severn, Kimo Leopoldo, those guys. What was your favorite moment, throughout your first UFC run?
Yeah, I think my favorite moment, and I mean, I had a lot of good moments and a lot of good fights because I was fighting the best every time.
Right.
But ever since I walked into the UFC, after me and Hoyce, I became a fan favorite, and then I started getting all the championship fights. I got Hoyce the second fight I was in there, was able to bring him to the distance, even though I beat him up. I thought I got the recognition. Hoist, they went left, which was smart because we were catching up to them. Like, we were all figuring it out
Yeah.
because we didn't have the skills they had, but we were catching up. And so they left, which I think was a good move on their part to leave. But then it left me standing on top of the mountain. And so then I had an opportunity to fight a lot of guys they were bringing in. But I would have to say the one that sticks out to me the most would have to be the Severn fight, because I think Severn was he was so favored in that fight. Like, I couldn't understand it, how he was favored, because I couldn't understand it, because I was like, is he going to wrestle me to death? Like, I'm not going to get tired. My stamina at that time was tremendous. I could go forever. And he couldn't submit me because I was a submission expert. And he's not going to beat me standing up because I know how to fight. I'm Muay Thai. I know how to fight standing up. And I'm just thinking, he's just going to wrestle me and try to wear me out, like, because he's not going to ground and pound me. I mean, that's not going to happen. I mean, I don't see that happening. So it just didn't make sense to me when I went into that fight. I was so confident, not like Hoist, where I didn't know what was going on. I was just going off of what I'd already done. But I was literally looking at Dan, and I already knew what he did in those tournaments. He was destroying everybody, but everybody he destroyed had zero striking and grappling combinations. Zero. So he wasn't fighting anybody that could literally knock him out or submit him. And I was like, I walked in that fight thinking, am I missing something? Because I don't see how this is going to go any other way but me. And it didn't. I mean, I went in and I did what I thought I was going to do. I didn't think it was going to go that fast, but I did believe I was going to get him. There was no question in my mind. But I thought it was going to be a knee bar or a heel hook where I would break his ankle, because I didn't think he would tap and he would try to spin, which he tells everybody, you just got to roll through that. And I'm laughing because I'm thinking, you try to roll through a heel hook, you're done. So I knew what he would try to do if I got him in a heel hook. And even to this day, he believes that. Like, you just got to spin through that. And I'm like, anybody that knows how to do a heel hook just knows all they got to do is just slide their hips over, make your leg into L shape, and you go to spin, you're going to break your leg. So I just couldn't see it. So that was my favorite just because I was such an underdog. And in my mind, I'm like, I don't know what you guys are looking at, but I don't see it. And I went in there and I proved it. So and then I was the first champion. That to me was one of my highlights.
No, definitely one of your highlights because I think you were the first champion in the promotion's history.
Yes, first one to get a belt. Yep.
So there you go. I mean, that's definitely a highlight. Number one. So obviously you lose the belt to Dan, but I mean that fight was my opinion. It's kind of controversial, but that's just my personal opinion, you know.
That
But
was a horrible that and that was a horrible fight. I mean, I
right,
was horrible. I was literally horrible. And I don't want to speak for Dan because Dan gets upset, says a great technical fight, and I'm like, whatever. I just think they should have stripped both of us of the belt. They should have taken it away from both of us because we didn't go and fight. That was not a fight. We both should be embarrassed of that fight.
right. No, I mean that's just and me. I mean that's the thing because I watched it and it wasn't like it was you said it, so I'm just gonna repeat what you said. It was lackluster,
It
and
was
when you
we didn't fight. We
yeah.
did not fight. We didn't fight.
Yeah, I mean, it just looked like fucking shit, and it's just like, okay, yeah, you're gonna give this guy the belt. I mean, have a call draw or no contest and
Or
redo the.
strip, or strip me of the belt and have us fight again. Like
Yeah,
don't give it to somebody when neither one of us fought. Like it was horrible.
that shit's just so fucking irritating, man. I can't even. Oh
Uh,
god, was that part of the reason why you decided to leave the promotion to go WWF? Was that one of the reasons, or was that just kind of an outlier?
No, I think one of the reasons well, the most important was because I couldn't support my family. They were going through some issues with always going being in court, always being shut down, having to pick up and move somewhere else at the last minute. So there was a lot of money being spent on lawyers and
Right.
defense and trying to buy people off to be able to have events in places. And they were just running out of money and they couldn't pay me my contract. What I needed to keep my gym running, keep the fighters going. The sacrifice I made uh, that a lot of people don't understand was, and I made it for not myself, but for other people. And I don't feel like that they literally appreciated it because I left something that I loved doing because I wasn't going to get paid in order to be able to keep the fighters' house up. So guys like Frank and Jerry Bolander and Pete Williams and a lot of those guys, I know Pete and Jerry, they appreciated it. My brother ended up leaving. And I was paying for everything those guys needed to train, and I couldn't train. I couldn't be there doing what I love doing. I had to go away and do something else in order to keep all this running. I had to have group homes for kids, which is we were helping at-risk children at the time. And we had a home. We had 6 boys in it. And I didn't want to let them down. I didn't want them to go back into juvenile hall. I wanted them to be able to stay there and graduate and go into life. So I had to keep that house running and then my own home with my own family. And then I had a gym. I had 3 gyms. I had a weight training gym. I had a gym that had the ring for sparring. And then I had a matted area. Those are 3 different buildings. And so I was keeping that up and running. So, I had somewhere between $12,000 to $13,000 bill each month to be able to keep all of this going. And so instead of me going, well, I'm going to shut it all down and I'm just going to go keep doing what I want to do and everybody else can just leave and I'm going to take care of me. I didn't do that. I literally went out and found something else to do because I knew I couldn't keep up what I was going and I couldn't keep these other guys living their dream. And I felt like I was going to let them down because I'm the one that got them started, right? I gave them the hope. And I couldn't keep doing it if I didn't go do something else because I wasn't making the money I needed to keep it going. So luckily for me, when I went into pro wrestling, and I had a little experience before that, and I liked it, didn't know what it was like at the top. But once I got into it and I started doing it, I loved it. I mean, I literally fell in love with it. And so it worked out really well for everyone. But there was some sacrifices, and I took a huge risk because if I didn't do well or make it, I wouldn't be sitting here right now because they'd have buried me. They tried to bury me when I made the move. But because I was successful, it played out well.
Played out very well. I mean, it played out tremendously well. Obviously you're run with the WWF. You break in. This is the coolest thing to me. I mean, it's such a fucking trip. You break in and you debut in early '97. Then they immediately put you as a guest referee for WrestleMania 13 on one of the greatest matches of all time between Bret Hart and Stone Cold Steve Austin.
Yeah, 94.
94. Oh, you're 94. Okay, I thought you were there 97. Okay, maybe I was.
94, 97 is, might be 97 because 93, 94, 95, maybe it was 96 because 93 UFC. Before that was Japan from 89 to 90. Are you still there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Sorry, I lost your picture.
No, you're good. Yeah, I'm just I'm grabbing something.
Oh,
I'm
I
grabbing.
got you.
Yeah.
Yeah, so 90, I think it was from 89 to 93. I was in Pro Wrestling Japan, Pancrase, and then 90, I think it was, maybe it was 93, 94, 95, maybe it was 96 to 98, was it? Man, it's been so long ago, I can't remember.
Yeah. Maybe 97 to 98.
Maybe
Yeah,
maybe that's it. That's right. Yeah, 97 to 99. That's it.
yeah,
Yep.
97, 99. That's what it was. And so
Yep.
now I
Yeah.
grab my thing. I wish I could have had the other one, but it's fine. This will do because this is the match that you refereed. This right here was the
Yeah.
belt that was on that line for that match. So you know this belt, and it's the Bret Hart Hitman belt.
Yeah.
So what was your experience like going to your first WrestleMania, being referee and kind of being that atmosphere, in front of that many fans? And
Yeah, it was mixed feelings when I first, was told I was going to referee, which is not what I went to wrestling for, was to be a referee, right?
yeah,
First, you're telling me, hey, you're going to go referee Bret Hart and Stone Cold. And I'm like, how is that going to work? Like, I'm not sure I even know all the rules. They're like, no, don't worry, dude. Don't worry about it. And I was like, and I'm thinking in my head, like, how am I? Because actually wrestling and doing moves and stuff like that, I can kind of get that part of it. But how do I be a referee and pretend somebody's literally doing what they're doing without getting too involved into it? Because I'm a tough guy, right?
right.
I just don't know if I could do this, right? And so I know going into the match, I was a little bit confused about whether or not I was going to be able to pull this off.
Right.
And about 5-10 minutes in the match, man, it was unbelievable. I mean, I didn't even have to even think about whether or not it was real or not. It just felt real. Everything just flowed. Those guys did such a tremendous job. It felt like I was in a real fight. Like I was literally watching two guys fight. So it was really a tremendous match. Those guys did just a hell of a job.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I remember I saw Bret Hart on Stone Cold's Broken Skull Sessions podcast last year, and he talked about it. And it was kind of like, obviously, the last scene, where it's like, I mean, it was a brawl. They go to the fans, and you follow them the whole way,
Yeah.
and you follow them back into the ring, and then you follow. It's just like it literally looks like a fucking fight. Like two guys want to rip each other's head off, right? And yeah,
they weren't being easy with each other, and
yeah.
they put it out there. So I was just truly honored, knowing now. Truly honored to be a part of that history, because I truly believe that was probably one of the biggest moments in pro wrestling history.
It really was. It really was. And you obviously know the Steve Do tap and then the iconic image, and then Bret Hart going in, and then you shove Bret Hart off, and then you do like the stance, like, all right, you want to fight me? Come on now. It's like I love it. So
It played really well.
It played really well. And I think wrestling, to your point, it really blurs lines between reality and fiction. And when you're in the moment, you can tell it's real. And I think with your character, it was the development progressed so naturally, because a lot of what you were doing was pretty much just kind of showcasing what you already had been doing for all the years prior. Through the mixed martial arts, the Lions Den matches, right, with Owen Hart and all those other guys. Obviously the feud with Rocky Maivia, being able to put him in the ankle lock. You obviously being a submission expert or specialist, and obviously having the grappling background, and it kind of fell into place. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and I was very fortunate that I was able to get in with a bunch of guys in WWF at that time.
Yeah.
That were literally open to doing stuff. Because I know if you go a little bit farther back from that time, there's a lot of guys in there that would not have been comfortable working with me. But I think because of the guys that were there at the time, they were all hungry, because all their top guys were over in WCW.
Right.
And I think it would have been a lot more difficult for me to come into an environment when you already have 20 guys that are superstars. And they're most of them are not going to be willing to try new stuff, because they're used to what they're doing. So I think I came in at the right time with the right group of guys, because they were all willing to work with me and learn with. They were literally learning. They were teaching me. I was learning on the job. So a lot of great guys there. I learned a lot from a lot of those guys, because again, I wasn't the one that was the pro there. I mean, even though I had all the skills and I was pro somewhere else and I was on top of that, when I went into pro wrestling, I was on the bottom of the totem pole. Even though I was being put over, I was on the bottom of the totem pole when it came to the understanding and the ability to work in a ring. I was down here, and so I was learning from every one of those guys.
Yeah, and obviously, you learned a lot, and then your run basically, just like I said, to your point, right? It was like you were almost like like an upper mid carder, and eventually, you're IC champion, King of the Ring, World Tag Team champion. I just thought, why didn't they give you this belt, man? That's why I had to bring it out. I'm like, what do you think about that?
Yeah,
Because
I was always hungry for that belt. Unfortunately, I think a lot of stuff that happened towards the end of my career with the Bret Hart thing, some other things in my family behind the scenes. I think it was just a culmination of stuff that just I felt like if I didn't get out, that I was gonna suffocate in there because it just felt like there was so much going on around me. The Bret Hart thing, it felt like from that point on, there was a lot of untrust of what people were going to do, how they were going to do it, because of people you may be affiliated with or that you were hanging out with. Or now, like with Bret Hart, I mean, I went and trained with him, and then that happened, and then you got the Owen Hart situation, and it just felt like it was just so much going on, and I just felt then I was getting beat all the time. Like I literally lost 4 or 5 matches in a row, and I hadn't done that my entire life, right? I mean, if I lost one, I'd never lose two, right? I just never
right,
done it. And here I was being put in a situation now where I was getting beat frequently. And I came in with my reputation already intact. They built me up, no question, in pro wrestling and mainstream with the character I came in with. But I was already solidified in the world of MMA and no holds barred in that fight world. And now all of a sudden I was starting to go this way. And like they were going to, I felt like I was going to be dropped lower than where I went in at. Even though I was built up to a higher level, I felt like I was going below what I came in with, the reputation. And I just felt like I need to start kicking and punching and fighting my way into a better situation. And that's basically what I did. I felt like I needed a breath of fresh air. I needed a time away because even some of the angles that were being pushed in my direction were just not ones that were. And I guess if it was later in life, maybe. But I had kids that were 6, 8, and 10, and to them and their friends, wrestling was real. And
yeah.
so some of the stuff that they were going towards were even in normal situations were very risky. And so I had to find a way to stop it. And I was able to do that. So, and, unfortunately, I hope that there was no hard feelings. I hope that they can understand my position and why I did what I did because it was, I needed to save my kids from being harassed in school about some of the things that they were trying to get me to do.
Yeah, and I think one of the things, and because I mean, I'm just gonna say this, 'cause I saw you say comment on this. I think like maybe a year ago or maybe recently about Chris Jericho. That was your kind of your last angle that they involved you with, and then you basically said recently that he's basically a fake tough guy, right? Uh, so
Well, I
yeah,
don't I don't know about now. I mean, I know the guy's put work in. I
yeah,
know he's trained and he has done some stuff. So, that was kind of a wrestling character,
sure,
tough
sure,
guy, but I respect the guy. The guy's
yeah,
done so much for wrestling. And he's not afraid to get in there and on the mat and start learning stuff. So I give him his respect, but let's not fool anybody though. But he's not. Just like I see a lot of keyboard warriors out there who always talking smack, right?
right.
Yeah, let's not go there. I mean, yeah, you're successful in this area, but it's a whole nother thing to be a world champion. I mean, let's not even forget about that, right? Let alone being a world champion in multiple countries. So we just halt on that a little bit, but you got to give respects.
You gotta give respect, but it's all about the gold, baby. It's all
That's it.
about the gold.
That's right. You got to get. Hey, man, you got to be the best wherever you go. You got to get there. That's it.
That's it. So now, obviously, you leave the company in late '99, and then in a turn of century, turn of millennium, you're basically back in UFC, I think. Or are you independent fighting, then you go back, or I think you go straight to UFC. Well, can I talk to me about that?
Yeah. After pro wrestling, I went. I don't think I went to the UFC. Yeah, I did. Did I? No, I didn't. I actually had a couple fights in the UFC. but that was prior to getting into the WWF, I believe.
Yeah.
Once I got out, I started going over to Japan,
Japan.
and I had a couple fights with Pride. My first one I ended up winning, and which was a pretty good opponent too, who had just beaten a couple top ranked guys. I ended up beating him and knocked him out. That's when I realized that when I came back that I wasn't where I was, where my strength was the ground. I couldn't get to the ground, and so I really started working on my striking, and that's where I knocked out because I think they thought I was going to come in and start grappling. I came in and really worked on my kickboxing skills and was able to knock my first opponent out, and then came in against the big Japanese kid where my boxing looked good because I knocked him down once and nobody had knocked him down, and so I was doing really well. But then, I end up having some, I don't know whether it's stress, whatever, because I was going through a divorce, and all the kids were dropped on me. 3 weeks into my before I was leaving to go to Japan, and had nobody to. I mean, it was literally just all this stuff coming down, and I just didn't train the way I wanted to for the fight, and ended up beating the crap out of the guy for 12 something minutes. And then I couldn't, I remember losing consciousness. I was in the corner laying on the turnbuckle, and all I was seeing was white. And that's when I was like, okay, I'm in trouble. And never been there. I never been like that. I never got in trouble like that. And that's when I really realized, hey, I just wasn't the same fighter. But in my mind, there was no sense in me wanting to quit, because just like I am today, it's like, I'm always going to challenge myself. I'll put myself in the most challenging position I can. But as time goes on too, I start to realize you need to, at least it has to make sense. Like going in against somebody that's a world champion now, or somebody is a ranked fighter, is not smart, right? I mean, that's just not a smart move. But just going in and fighting guys here and there because I love doing it, I love the training, I love to challenge myself. Then that's where I put myself, because then I realized where I was at, who I was, even though I had to fight Tito.
Exactly.
That was more of a position that I was put in because UFC was dying. And I remember Dana came to me and said, hey, we just can't seem to get the numbers. Like Tito's a champ. We're putting him against different guys, but we're getting, our highest I think it was close to 30,000 buys or something like that with Tito.
With Tito.
And I'm like, I can blow it up. I says, I can blow it up. And he's like, yeah, we get people all the time to say that. And I said, damn, I'm telling you, I can do it. And he was like, yeah. And so he wouldn't pay me what I wanted. So I said, I'll tell you what. I said, if I do this much, then you pay me on the back end of it. Then if I do what I say I'm going to do, I get this much. And he said, okay. And so we did it, but that's a whole nother story. That's a whole nother story that I don't want to get into. But so I did what I said I was going to do. I doubled it, tripled it, just blew it up. And Tito has always been a great fighter and has that character. But unfortunately, at that time, there was nobody that could play off of him. Like there was nobody that would get people interested in seeing him fight. Even though he had all of the skills in the world, he was, in my opinion, pound for pound, one of the best fighters. And yet he had nobody that would challenge him in a sense, mentally and physically, when it came to interviews and getting people interested in the fight. There was just nobody there. But when I got in there, I knew, because of who Tito was and because of some of the back end story that we had, that I could just light this thing up. And we did. We went mainstream. It blew. I mean, in my opinion, and I think in a lot of people's opinion, we saved the UFC to where they could sell it for $4 billion. I believe that fight was the turning point that saved the UFC. Of course, a lot of the things behind that had to happen, like the Forrest Griffin fight, Stephan Bonner, that fight had to happen. A lot of things had to happen to keep the momentum going, no question. But we were definitely the fuel for the fire.
I agree with that, because obviously you guys won Feud of the Year by both Wrestling Observer Newsletter and Sherdog and MMA Junkie, and Fight of the Year by all these different, and Feud. So Feud and Fight of the Year, I mean, it speaks for itself. The buy rates were at that time astronomical. It's almost like, I mean, this is a complete different tangent, but it's almost like when Wesley Snipes did Blade for Marvel. Marvel was tanking. There was no MCU, none of that shit. Blade comes, saves the company, And then, like you said, it provides a kind of leeway for UFC to then say, we can sell this for $4 billion. We can do these things now because of the Shamrock Ortiz fight.
Unfortunately, because of some personal issues, which to me has no place in the recognition of people who have done things for business. When you let your personal um, vendettas or whatever you want to call them get in the way of what people have succeeded to do, and you don't want to recognize those things because of your own issues. To me, that's where I think some of the disappointment comes in with the history of UFC.
I agree. I agree. I mean, there's a lot of that. It's kind of shady if to say that, because of because of that kind of intrinsic bias, just due to the lack of being able to be the bigger man and letting things go. But it is what it is. I mean, what can you do? So, and yeah, talk to me kind of, because at the same time you had the Ortiz fight, you also went to TNA and you won the first gauntlet, became the first ever NWA World Heavyweight Champion for the TNA promotion, which is now Impact Wrestling, which you're currently wrestling on. How did you balance that, and what was going through your mind to do that? That's fucking awesome.
Yeah, it was actually before the Tito fight where
Yeah.
we started to get going on that. And I remember the Jarretts came to me and wanted to bring me in. And I was like, dude, I appreciate it. They were great to work for. I mean, I really love those guys. They were great people, good to work for. They were always fair to me. Even when I came in and I had to fight Tito, they brought in a Ron Killings, and he was there. And I was so honored, really honored to be able to wrestle with him and then be able to be a part of that history. Because you look at it, he was, and I don't think it's talked about enough. Like, he was the first African American to capture that belt.
He was.
And to me, that should be that's something special, especially in the world that we live in today. Man, those are things that should be recognized and not just brushed under a rug. So I was really honored to be a part of that. And he was a great dude. I mean, really enjoyed working with him. Great hand too, good worker.
Great worker. Yeah, and he's still going today, right? So that kind of speaks to itself. I
Yeah.
know. And it's fun. I mean, and I don't mean to inject myself into it, but what you just said. So I'm the first player Pakistan has sent to play in the Arena Football League. The only other Pakistani football player to play professionally was Jabran Hamdan, who played in the NFL. So when I retired from competitively playing full time 2 years ago, I hit him up on IG. I said, "Hey Jabran, what's up? I used to watch you. You don't know me personally, but we're both from the same cloth. We're both from the same background. We both have the same milestone." And he's all like, "Congrats on your career, man! Awesome!" I'm like, And now it's like, I mean, I have a very small but kind of significant following, small but significant, to where I can sign autographs, and I'm very grateful for that. But obviously, like, to your point, these things aren't talked about enough because for whatever reason they just get brushed under the rug, or there's some other narrative that's kind of dominating the headlines.
Yeah.
So
And but hopefully as time goes on, he'll start, maybe focusing on that a little bit more. But yeah, again, like I said, those are there's all these different things in my career that I look at and I was like, hey, that was special and this was special. That's another one. Obviously I didn't get the win, but just to be a part of that and be able to, help somebody like Ron Killings get in that position, it was an honor, man. I really appreciated it.
yeah, absolutely. I mean, even if you didn't get the win, you were the first champion to then help get him to help transition that over to him.
We had a great match. I mean, it was a real good match, and he was able to capture that, and it was a tough match. It was a tough match. So I really appreciate his toughness and his ability to be able to go in and put himself in a position to be recognized like that, because you don't get there because someone just wants to put you there. You got to earn it, and he earned it.
He definitely did. No, he definitely did, and I'm proud for him too. I was really happy for you though, more importantly, because you needed this, in my opinion, and you never got this, but you got that. So I'm like, there we go. He finally got it.
Yeah, and Impact seems to be, they're growing, man. They're a legitimate company now, and they're
Yeah.
getting a lot of good talent coming in. So I'm really happy for them, man, and I'm just happy that I was able to be a part of a lot of that history.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of history you're part of. The first ever UFC champion, first ND and world champion, Impact, first, and now we're gonna go UFC Hall of Fame inductee the next year. I mean,
Japan, first champion in Japan. Yeah,
first Mexico, Japan. I mean, yeah, like you said, you look back on your career of all these these milestones, which are so incredible.
First crossover led the way for everyone else to come into pro wrestling from fighting.
Yeah, you're the first one to do it. So I mean, talk to me. I mean, like, obviously, and you got in the Hall of Fame in 2003. You and Dan, I think, right, 2003, first ever class. You're the first ever inductee, I think,
No, it
right?
was Royce.
Hoist. Okay, so Hoist and you, yeah. So the first UFC one. Okay,
Yeah.
so yeah, and I think that's fitting. Because you guys were the first, pioneers. But what was it like fighting in the mid 2000s versus like fighting in the mid 90s? Because now it's like it's more semblance to what it is now. Like, the promotions, all that stuff. Because back in the 90s, there was no promotions. Just show up, fight, beat the shit out of whoever your opponent is, and win or lose. But then now it's like you have promotions, all the theatrics involved. Talk to me about that.
Yeah. I, I would have done well in this fighting, but because of Pancras and the way it forced you to be good on the ground and good standing up, because you couldn't rely just being on the ground because of the escapes. So it forced you to be well-rounded. And that was something that really gave me an opportunity to come into the UFC and be successful, because I always had an option, where a lot of guys didn't have an option. They had one thing they could do, and that was it. And so early on, I was able to dominate, me and Hoist. And even though Hoist was just strictly ground, there was a lot of people that didn't know the ground well enough. So for me, it was a really great situation for me, because I was well-rounded in both areas. So I was able to dominate a whole bunch. But I think that, you talk about today, and I fought in today's, so it's not like I don't know both.
Right.
But obviously I wasn't as well-rounded with the ground stuff because of injuries and things like that. But I felt like, I could have done really well even in today's standards, just because of my strength and my skill sets. It just felt like I could have really done well. And, when you look at the UFC in the early, and then you look at it now, the thing I see that separates the early into the day is that early on, there were literally guys that were just tough guys, badasses. I mean, they were just really tough guys. And you had some of them that weren't, but the majority of them are really tough guys. And then today it's more like they're well-rounded and skilled fighters. You don't see a lot, and they're in there, don't get me wrong, but there's very few in between, where you just see guys that are just badasses, like just rock solid, tough guys. And you don't see a whole lot of that, because now it's more advertising and more business now, where you don't see a lot of that anymore. We just, guys, because of the way the fights are now, there's just so much more skill involved. Whereas back in the day, because there was some skill and some toughness, you just seen a lot of tough guys, a lot of brawls, a lot of good fights, guys staying up and taking punches and keep fighting back. So you don't get to see those anymore, because they stopped the fights, right? I mean, like, we would be able to see them if they allowed guys to be able, like, the Oleg Taktarovs, where a guy would get beat up for 15 minutes. The other guy would get tired, and Oleg would come around and beat him up because he was able to take a bunch of punches. I was the same way. You could just keep hitting me, and I'm going to keep coming. I'm going to get you sooner or later. But that's taken away now. Like, you can't do that now. Like, a guy gets hit with 4 or 5 punches and they stop the fight. And so you don't get, like they call the BMF title. The BMF title is somebody that goes in there and takes an ass whooping and comes out and wins.
Yeah.
The BMF title, like that, to me, is a guy that is a way underdog in skill sets. Guy just beats the crap out of him, but yet finds a way to win. That's a BMF title. But we don't have that anymore. I take nothing away from, Diaz and what was the other guy's name? Diaz and
Jorge Masvidal.
Masvidal, a great guy, man. Just a great fighter. Just incredible fighters and tough guys. Don't even Diaz is just the Diaz brothers, or to me, are BMFs. Like, they are.
Yeah.
And so is Masvidal. But in that particular fight, that just didn't. It didn't look like a BMF fight, right? I mean, they were fighting, and it was a good fight. But again, like I said, it's not their fault, because in today's MMA, when you get hit too many times, they stop it. You look at when I fought Tito. I mean, the only way I had a chance of beating Tito, and I knew it, was that I was going to have to take a beating. I knew it. And so when he took me down, I knew I was going to get punched and I was going to get beat on. I knew all these things were going to happen. But I was going to win. I was going to beat him, because I knew he was going to get tired from hitting me. Because you can't knock me out. right? So he had to just keep coming, but they stopped the fight. I mean, I know I was getting hit, but I knew I was going to get hit. That was part of my thing, knowing the only way I'm going to beat the guy with the injuries and me not being able to train I want to do is I'm just going to have to be tougher than him. Just be tougher than him because I'm not going to outwork him. And so I just let him come and they stopped the fight. And so he can't, he just doesn't let guys like the Oleg Taktarovs and myself and some of the other guys, they just don't let you do that. They stop them too soon.
Right.
But I get it. I get it. I get it.
And to that point, I mean, what do you think about Conor and the Dustin Poirier fight over the past weekend?
I saw it coming. I saw it coming. You can't be away from something, and people are going, "There's no such thing as ring rust." That just doesn't happen. And it's like when you're in a title fight and you're fighting guys at that level, it matters. Yeah, maybe if he came in and fought somebody that was like in the fifth ranked or fourth ranked, maybe even third, he could get by with it. When you're fighting 1-1 ranked guys that are up there, that 1%, you can't take time off and come back and just fight them. It doesn't work like that. So when I hear these guys talking about whatever, you can say what you want, but when you're fighting at that level, if he'd have taken another fight down or something like that, maybe it doesn't matter. But when you take that much time off, yeah, it matters.
Most definitely. All right, so I mean, I could keep you for an hour, but I don't know how you get on time though. But I mean, just kind of what are your goals for 2021? I guess anything to look out for, and pretty much any closing thoughts, for the viewers and all your fans across the globe.
Yeah, we're doing podcasts, World's Most Dangerous Podcast, kinshamrock.com on my website. If you want to go on there and check that out, we also have a newsletter for Valor BK, also for kinshamrock.com. You can be notified on all the new stuff that we got coming up. So we've got a lot of interesting things that we're working on right now. Valor BK, which is a bare knuckle organization, we already did one. It was a huge success. Of course, then COVID comes in and throws a damper on everything. So, but we're still working on that platform on how we can still put fights on and still get it out to people. So we're working on that. Hopefully within the next 6 months, we'll have something, hopefully. But again, like I said, nobody knows where everything's going yet. So it's really hard to tell what we're going to do until we know where they're going with this COVID thing and how everything's going to shake out in the world with all the change and stuff. So we just have to sit tight and kind of wait and see how things are playing out for us to move forward. Cause we're not just going to throw money away. We're going to put on good events and we want to make sure that people get to see it.
100%. Ken, even though we're out of time, I do want you back on the show, so we'll make it something happen in the future, brother. I really appreciate your time today, and this conversation is to be continued. So, appreciate. Yeah, pleasure, man. All right, take care. Hey, that's that world's most dangerous man, Ken Shamrock. Ken, have a great rest of the day. Have a great weekend. We'll talk to you soon, brother.
Appreciate you, man. Take care.
Take care.